Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Monday, February 20th, and I'm starting late again. I'm definitely debating about what defines a podcast as a podcast. Really, I probably should give more thought to considering this a podcast, as it were, and going by that name. But there is something certainly subconscious in my mind as far as like one person not on camera talking, like, doesn't quite feel like what you would expect from a podcast. Anyways, I feel like podcasts pretty much have to have at least one other person in them to have more of that radio feel. Although even at that, there are definitely some radio shows where it's just like one person talking. So I should have been playing probably a little bit more of Yu-Gi-Oh, but I have been instead playing Prey, and while I do enjoy Prey, it does have this weird problem in that it is being compared slightly. It is basically doing the Bioshock thing in the Crisis engine by Arcane Studios, and at that level, it's by that comparison, there are some problems with Prey, but I still am enjoying it. It's just not quite as good as I would say Bioshock 1 is, or Bioshock 2. Bioshock in particular, 1 and 2, can be merged in the nostalgic minds of players such as me, and then you got two games from two different teams where you more than likely will remember the good parts and forget the bad parts. This is coming soon. This seems like this would be coming right now, but whatever. So as far as how far did I get playing off screen, because I think I did do some of this off screen, I got to 4,300. If I can get to 5,500, that's great. Anything above that today would be great, but honestly, all you're really pushing for are legacy packs and titles. And yeah, we can do nothing really with the crystals we have at the moment, but we do have this, so we'll just pick the next one. It's still questionable how you possibly are going to get all of these. It just kind of seems like you won't. You're only going to get a couple of these. So you get a pickup pack, and then you get one ultra rare. Which that unlocks not one, but two secret packs. Found a new card pack. So not much there. Let's go over here and look at the featured cards and see how many we already own. A decent amount. This hero deck is from the second anime series of Yu-Gi-Oh! And since they're at the fourth or fifth anime series of Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't know if it's particularly playable. Also, popularity would play a role there in that the second anime series definitely not as popular. And then this is just another secret pack. Neither one are particularly great secret packs to go with, and I just don't have crystals for it. How are we on our legacy packs? Enough that we could purchase 10 to get a few more legacy cards that are new and a lot of legacy cards that would just be duplicates. I think they're pretty good at picking out these legacy cards too, in the sense that the goal here is to give you cards you couldn't possibly play, and I think they do a pretty good job at that for themselves, not really for the player. Is there some other way to earn this? Yeah, it just doesn't seem like there's another way you could have earned these packs. There's nothing else to purchase, per se, unless just purchasing things in general would unlock something, and I don't think that's the case. So yeah, this like first anniversary campaign here seems to be like the only way you get that. So I'm just hoping after 7 days they'll do another 7 days. Alright, let's hop into Yu-Gi-Oh! So yeah, I guess I'm looking for general feedback if people think that potentially going with the phrase podcast as the title here would be better. It definitely feels like there should be a de-emphasis on the Yu-Gi-Oh part, even though the Yu-Gi-Oh part is what seems to bring a lot of attention. But it's just not really accurate. I am jumping between different sections fairly quickly, and the Yu-Gi-Oh is really just background noise. I did have a decent experience with this this event, playing with this Red Eye Black Dragon deck, although in all fairness I still think a significant amount of what I'm running into is people just disconnecting and giving up. Let's see, I don't think I want to do a full burial, but I think it actually works to potentially do this. Nope, that didn't work. And then without learning, I'll just attack that. And that raised I guess that raised its attack back to 3,000 as it was going to the discard pile or the graveyard, which they didn't really need to animate that, I think. Alright. So one of the things, certainly in the comparison, is to Prey is Atomic Heart is out, and I've seen 2 reviews, and both reviews kind of start off good, but then the game seems to just not be very well balanced and wear down people over the course of it. In particular, it seems like the enemies are bullet spongy, the bosses don't really have good enough gimmicks as far as what you're doing to defeat them, so you end up instead just having to dodge their attacks and then wait for an opening and attack them in a very basic manner. Then you get into these open world sections where enemies are just all around you and infinitely spawning, and as such you can't ever clear out the area because the robots just get refilled and repaired. In a lot of ways, it seems like the gimmicks of magic in one hand and guns in the other get added to games like Prey and Atomic Hearts. And there's even another one that I'm trying to think of. They all get added to that from just the general basic concept of System Shock, and then they barely get any other changes to the gameplay style. And that, honestly, even BioShock probably sped up the process quite a bit compared to System Shock, or even what Prey is. Prey is actually kind of slow. The number one advice that they should have done is they should have locked you into a story mode for quite a while. Like, I'm at a point where I needed to see a message. The message gets basically deleted, and then you need to recover the message. And if that is not the first thing you do, because you can find an optional mission, forget the optional missions, forget exploring, forget any of that. You should just stay on the path and run directly towards the main story until you see the deleted message, at least, and probably even further than where I've gone, because it's not linear enough at the beginning. It wants to be the super open world, which does not work. I spent at least an hour and a half running around the open world lobby area, which is like the second area you get into, with no gun at all. I had a glue gun that could slow down things, which very quickly you're going to find that that's not actually that useful. Maybe in an upgraded state it might be more useful, but the enemies, by me exploring, I was running into, the phantoms can't be really stopped by glue guns. In fact, even the small mimic characters really can't be stopped by glue guns particularly well. You're kind of much better off using the right-click survival time slowdown feature and just running up and hitting them with wrenches. They wanted that first, a very small beginning section to be running around with the wrench only, and I expanded that by a lot more time than I really should have taken. Let's see. Well, I guess we'll set that, and that'll be about all we can do. But once you get, if you follow the main story, you're going to find a silenced 9mm pistol handgun, and you totally need that. In fact, I had plenty of upgrades from just over searching the areas, that by the time I even got the 9mm, I could do a whole stage 1 of upgrades without getting the skills to upgrade any higher. And to compound that problem, fairly quickly after you've seen the recovered video, so you'll find the 9mm, then you should do probably about 2 hours of gameplay with the 9mm in a side section, and then when you come back to the lobby from that side section after you've seen the video, at that point you will fairly quickly find a shotgun, and once you have that shotgun, then you have the beginning of all the standard weapons. There seems to be, like, there's going to be some special weapons later on, perhaps if the game just had an abilities to begin with, or if it had more normal enemies in which you saw shotguns or handguns around, that you would know they existed, that would have been helpful too. Because it definitely felt like you potentially were just going to run around the whole game with just a wrench, which would have gotten very repetitive. There's some kind of like psychic abilities that I'm about to get, I think, and so I still really should have been in a much more linear experience. Yeah, and it seems like the enemies kind of are fairly willing to respawn every time you exit and enter an area, and respawn in even stronger versions of themselves. So you can't really clear off an area and make it safe, it feels like. At least the lobby area. You're constantly going to enter an area and have more things to shoot. There's also a massive amount of junk collection that has made me upgrade my suit inventory twice already, because I'm just picking up a ton of junk that then you take to a recycler to turn into base materials, to then you take to a crafter to craft bullets and health kits and things like that. Also craft weapons if you need to craft weapons, but there's a high chance you will never need to craft weapons. There's a decent chance you don't even need to carry a couple of weapons. And there's a whole dismantle ability to take weapons and dismantle it to get spare parts, and I'm not sure if the spare parts are really helpful. So, yeah. Prey seems like it's a fine game, but it definitely feels like BioShock did it better. Definitely feels like it took a lot more time to get the Crysis engine, the Cry engine, to do the exact same thing, or a very similar feeling thing, that the whatever engine it was in BioShock 1, which I assume BioShock 1 was done in the Unreal Engine like 3, maybe 4, as far as the original version of BioShock, not the remastered. I imagine the remastered may have bumped it up somewhat. Okay, that did nothing. But yeah, the idea of can it run Crysis really seems like it's more of a growing argument as I'm playing Prey in particular, that Crysis is just not a good engine by modern standards. Maybe Crysis 1 was an amazing engine back in the day, but there's probably just not been enough people making games on the Crysis engine to let it grow as much as people have been making Unreal Engine games. Octopath Traveler 2 also has some reviews. These OpenCritic, Metacritic pages, if I see them, I probably should mention them. So the top critics average is giving it an 86. 92% of critics recommend it. It's considered mighty. This is probably the level of interaction I want with a lot of these mainstream video game reviewers, but it's also very questionable how mainstream you really are when you have like Game Informer, which is inevitably tied to GameStop, so they're always going to give positive reviews, so they really are not a valid source. And then IGN maybe is a valid source, but then like Six Axis, Game Revolution, Hobby Consolas, I've never even heard of these sites. Shack News, IGN Spain making the top list here. That's it's not really a great source even as an aggregator, um, because it is just all over the place. RetroArch, Reddit r/RetroArch has gotten over 1,100,000. They're calling it invaders, but it's people following their subreddit, which is, it's a round number, so I guess that's a milestone of sorts. The other thing about Atomic Heart, which we'll look at the Metacritic OpenCritic review here, and you can see it's fair, 74 average, 57% of people reviewing it. It is still weird that you're getting IGN Italy, IGN Spain, God is a Geek, all getting above this top line. Almost like this is just a random selection, which maybe this is just randomized, which honestly I don't think that's the way this list should probably go. They probably should have the most clicked on reviews, and honestly from this point you should be able to click and go to IGN's review directly. Another problem with Atomic Heart though is that this character is an idiot and he's just talking non-stop. He has this AI glove that he's that's talking back to him, and so there's just a ton of conversation, which some of those things in Atomic Heart could be fixed. You like severely reduce the amount of remaking, repairing in the open world. You severely reduce the amount of bullets needed. Arguably, some of the people reviewing Atomic Heart might be playing on a normal or hardcore mode, where if you're playing on an easy story mode, then you probably would do fine. In particular, I would also say Prey, don't even bother starting on normal, just start on easy. There's a story mode below that, but since it has a new game plus aspect to it anyways, start on easy and then jump up to something more on the second playthrough if you go through a second playthrough. And you'll have a much better experience. Okay. 1,500, 2,400, 1,500. I'm gonna do this. That was stupid. This Red Eyes Black Dragon is like crazy in how it all works, and I haven't learned most of it. But yeah, you can fairly quickly fix, I think, Atomic Heart if you just reduce the chattiness or remove some lines of dialogue in English, perhaps rewrite the lines of dialogue from the original Russian into just better lines of dialogues, perhaps localize it more, reduce the sponginess of the enemies as far as just how many shots they take, perhaps rethink the boss fights, but that would take more time. But little tweaks, little polishes within this 6-week to 6-month launch window of Atomic Heart could certainly fix some of the complaints around the game. I haven't, of the 2 reviews I've seen, heard anything that is incredibly unfixable. The storyline is going to be kind of obvious, and you can't redo the storyline that much. but that's fine. The storyline in BioShock, outside of its amazing twist, is very obvious if you're familiar with Ayn Rand and Randian ways of thinking. Let's see. Let's see, take this out of the graveyard and take this out of the graveyard. And then we activate this. Yes. And then we want to send somebody with the most amount of attack to 1250. Go ahead and equip this here. Go and set that there. Now, what is this card potentially going to do? Nothing. Okay. Good. It's a bit of a shame, though I would have liked Atomic Heart to be amazingly good. There is definitely also controversy around just Atomic Heart is a game about Russia, or a fictional sci-fi Russia. It doesn't really make Russia look good. It's definitely not propaganda. It makes Russia look good in the very intro sequence as it references BioShock and BioShock Infinite, but very quickly in the game you realize it's definitely not propaganda per se. But the bigger issue certainly is going to come down to, do you feel the need to boycott every single Russian business just because the Russian government has invaded Ukraine? On one level, maybe, yes, but you almost should wait till the United States government passes laws to say United States citizens can't do business with Russians. On another level, economic diplomacy, and not having just a full breakdown of economic diplomacy, has been argued to be actually very helpful. The budgets of militaries are in the billions, if not trillions. The amount of money that would go, even if all the profits from Atomic Heart, like 100%, went somehow to the Russian military budget. I mean, you're talking 100 million at most, and that's not likely how that's really happening. If that is really how it's happening, then the makers of Atomic Heart definitely wouldn't be able to make another game. They started development of Atomic Heart like 5 years ago, so before the Russian invasion. So if you had pre-ordered the game then, you would have been more than happy to do that. I think the composer of Atomic Heart is saying he's donating some, if not all, of his income to the Ukraine effort, and it doesn't really feel like the citizens in total are gung-ho about invading Ukraine either, so why punish the citizens that way? So yeah, it just doesn't really make a great argument to boycott a video game for that reason. And on a smaller level, like, life is short. If you want to entertain yourself and have fun, and just do it. Like the just say no boycott mentality is not one I really can suggest to people. It's like at a certain point, the negative effects of doing something like heroin or cocaine is just so much bigger than the positive effects of doing heroin or cocaine, so I'd say no to something like that. But yeah, buying a video game because some small amount of taxes is going to the Russian government just doesn't seem like that's worth it. Yeah. And it definitely puts you in a weird position where there's just like not anything that you can really say around any of that. Censored gaming apparently is is continuing to try and try and rebuild his website and his YouTube channel. He's made a secondary Twitter that is more, I guess, Dan, I guess is his name, for behind the scenes stuff. Plus, he is seemingly changed his Patreon to better reflect a certain amount of money per video he makes, which would encourage him to make more videos, which could be certainly a problem on censored gaming. Censored gaming certainly does do a lot more research than most content creators, including myself. But yeah, with this per creation Patreon page, where if he has 100 Patreons all pledging $1 for every creation, and he wants an extra $100, he could then just make a kind of low effort video. In particular, I could see him doing kind of what I do and talking about games on Steam that are semi-censored being sold as a censored version on Steam, but then have an uncensored patch to show the full adult content. Or he could go off on just slight tangents around videos. In all fairness, though, he would have to get pretty crazy. If he's making more than 5 videos a month, that would probably be about the point where I would say that's too much for censored gaming. But also, I can't deny that if he was making more than 4 videos or 5 videos a month, he's still making considerably less videos than I am, and that would still potentially be a fairly small amount of money for him to live off of. Yeah, all this guy can do is summon this time wizard. So maybe I could have attached this to that. But it does seem like censored gaming is trying to get back on his feet, whereas at a certain point there he was coming off as being nearly homeless in London. Where are all of my news articles? I must have jumped there. What happened here? Oh no. Did somehow macro mess up and open the same page on top of each other? I did see that there was an update to Firefox. No. That's not what happened. It's just the same old Firefox thing where if you click the right or left button too fast, it'll just jump down to the edge, to the ends. So you can never really get into the middle of the tabs. Alright. This week's probably going to be a pretty rough week for me as far as just accountability sections too. I did play Prey over the weekend. I do want to try and be more effective, but as for like Tuesday and Thursdays, which would be extra days when I would make pre-recorded footage, it's questionable how much of that I really will be able to make. On top of which, my neighbor just decided that he needed more work on his house. So all today I was being woken up by banging on walls again, and yeah. This is getting to be a little annoying, but I can't really blame him for having repair done to his house either. Can I? If anything, it just really shows that if I was going to build a house, I would definitely try to have something close to a glass dome all around my house, just for noise protection. Like, there's just too much noise. But it probably wouldn't be an actual glass dome. It would probably be a house within the house with like a major sound or insulation barrier. It does just feel like this deck is mostly around the idea of equipping things to increase his attack. Which I guess that is how Joey's deck worked for the most part. Is to just rely heavily on equip cards, which is like equip cards are just not something you even play in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Really. It's a whole category of things that really should rethink it and figure out if there's a way to either do quick spell equip cards or trap equip cards to have extra advantage, or do something else with equip cards that makes them more viable. Alright, so going through the Video Games Chronicle news, we'll try and burn through this fairly quick since we're late. Ubisoft has added Rainbow Six in the Division mobile games to its 2023-24 lineup. Again, this might be old articles, but we'll just repeat them. Ubisoft says it will attend E3 2023 if it happens. Tetris Effect is getting new modes on all platforms starting next week, February 23rd, so in a couple days. Apex Legends and Titanfall leads form a new studio called Wildlight Entertainment. Like, it is very ridiculous how the news just comes to a screeching halt when the weekend happens and there's just nothing happening otherwise. Man, I think it's taken me this long to figure out that's what you were supposed to do with the eggs. Is just summon them and then tribute them. I wasn't good enough for him. But that did probably save him some health. But he is out of cards. Sega is the latest Japanese company to raise employee salaries. Sega says Sonic Frontiers sales have greatly exceeded expectations. And I'm just covering this news without giving any opinion since I've talked about all of these things before. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's next update adds new box features and various bug fixes. Still don't know what that means. 3 Rivals told UK regulators that Xbox's Activision deal would harm competition. We never really got a full answer as to which of those 3 rivals it was. I'm gonna do nothing and just attack and see if we can win. The problem with an event like this, though, and being able to kind of win here, is it doesn't really feel like playing this deck would be possible in actual ranked. I did also get to level 32, and now I'm slowly making progress above that. One more win, or even 2 more losses, would get me the 200 gems, and then it would all just be gravy on top of that. Days after its last increase, Saudi Arabia once again upped its stake in Nintendo. This is not for a 3rd time. This is the 2nd time getting repeated. There was a huge Firaxis shakeup last week as let's see XCOM director and studio head exit. I kind of wish I was more of a continuing news reporter so that there might be more research or more information on a story like this instead of me just repeating the exact same stories that other people. I mean, I really am just repeating what Video Games Chronicle is saying, but if I could take it further, or Video Games Chronicles could take it further, and there would be a follow-up to any of these stories, that would be great. But I'm not sure I have ever seen a follow-up story on any video game news ever. There are updates to stories, which usually are just the other side responding in a short tweet or a correction of some sort. But even at that, that's usually not at Video Games Chronicles that's bothering to even correct if it's made a mistake. Let's see. Firaxis also confirmed that a new Sid Meier's Civilization game is in development, and they pretty much confirmed that to lose the bad press of the other 2 people leaving the company, I imagine. Let's see. 2K insisted that Jake Sullivan departed on good terms after a disappointing Midnight Suns launch. Even here, this Dr. Doom is not really in that Midnight Suns outfits of gold and black. Tencent had reportedly scrapped plans to launch its own VR hardware. There is actually a follow-up to this in which I think they have now confirmed that they have no interest in VR anymore. They, I think, had confirmed interest in the past. So let's do this. What do we want to send to the graveyard? Probably not the big things. Can we do anything here? Nope. New Hogwarts Legacy patch is out now on PS5 and PC. I did see, I have to assume this is Games Done Quick, and hopefully we'll see this article. But I did see that some speedrunning organization which really almost certainly has to be games done quick as a major speedrunning um, organization, because there's, I think, at most one other major speedrunning organization out there, and I couldn't even really tell you the difference between the different events and who's running which specific event, if there are even two organizations. I wouldn't be surprised if the Games Done Quick literally runs, like, obviously Summer Games Done Quick and some of those other events, but then they also run some of the other events that don't have Done Quick in the name. Regardless, one of the I think in particular the Games Done Quick have been, if not run from day one, they have been run for a long time now by a lot of, for lack of a better term, SJW or people. It's probably a little fair to just throw that accusation on everybody. So to be more generous, let's say the Games Done Quick people have taken a lot of actions that show they are very interested in inclusivity, particularly with pronouns. It has been a ridiculous example of the idea of doing the Twitter thing and having everybody have their pronouns listed, and I think it is straight up mandatory in the Game Done Quick that you list your pronouns next to your title, as they get YouTubers and celebrities and just speedrunners to all list their pronouns, or they list their pronouns on the screen. It creates a kind of ridiculous situation where, of all the speedruns I've looked at, I've seen maybe 2 or 3 people that have non-cisgendered pronouns that they're using, and everybody else is just, if he was a cisgendered male, it was they have he him as their pronouns. If it's a cisgendered female, which there aren't that many speedrunners females, but that they have she her more often than not. On top of the pronouns things, as far as Games Done Quick, they've also made specific separate events focusing on female speedrunners, which, I mean, maybe you could see the statistics there as far as just it not being anywhere close to 50-50 as far as female speedrunners versus male speedrunners. Honestly, I just think when you take a step back and think of what a speedrunner is, it's somebody who's got a lot of free time and is fairly obsessive, and that tends not to be a female person who would just play video games or stream video games over and over and over again. Even when you look at Twitch, the female streamers are barely playing video games, and they're often just chatting or doing a OnlyFans type presentation. Females just have better options available to them, and yeah, that's the way the world is. It's not particularly fair, so it's not surprising that it isn't 50-50 male-female speedrunners. But particularly in the sport of speedrunning, if you're going to call it a sport, there's absolute zero reason to segregate the genders out and have a female event or a male only event. If you did the opposite and had a male only speedrunning event, people would be up in arms. But yeah, it definitely is not a case where men have stronger muscles, so pressing controller buttons or mouse and keyboard buttons is better or faster. If anything, it should be the exact opposite. Females probably can make decisions slightly faster on average, and very possibly can move faster when pressing short buttons and Twitch reactions. So it really is, if you're going to call speedrunning a sport, an example of a sport that should not be split. like that, and they really shouldn't have specific events. Now, taking that same thought to the next events I've seen as far as games done quick, the idea of minorities such as based on race, there's a better argument there. Like, it should be somewhere around in America, if you're getting American speedrunners only, it should be around 20% of them are of African American descent, and you're not seeing that at all. You're seeing much closer to 1 or 2% of speedrunners being of African American descent. In all fairness, there's some internet problems there, particularly when you have worldwide people like Asians who just don't want to watch streamers on YouTube if they're African American. There's just straight up some racism that you don't even usually consider in that. But yeah, the black YouTube, black Twitch is its own separate thing, unfortunately. So I could see doing something like that. I could see bringing in more Asians. There should be a lot more Asian speedrunners in the games done quick speedruns, but I guess speedrunning in general is not that popular in Asia compared to esports. I imagine most speedrunners would instead just be playing esports in Asia, or those Asian speedrunners don't speak English, and there is definitely a fairly high English bias around the games done quick events. So yeah, there's been a lot of controversy and problems as far as just what they're doing and what they're trying to promote. Honestly, they were much better off not touching on any of that and just saying whoever submits the best scores and gives us a good pitch and a good demo, they would get a block in the speedrunning events. There's even controversy around that, in which some streamers have been cheating that, particularly when it was a live event, which now it's all just streaming to video really over the internet and just doing Zoom calls basically. But yes, some unethical streamers would claim they could do it in an hour, do a speedrun in an hour, and then they would take an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes and go over, knowing that there was no way they would ever actually have been able to, during that live performance, make that time. But yeah, they're banning Hogwarts Legacy, and I have to assume they're banning Hogwarts Legacy. Even if they're saying it's for a different reason, it's just because they're mad at J.K. Rowling. In fairness though, I might say it would be somewhat hard to speedrun Hogwarts Legacy anyways. I don't think it's super hard, but just to showcase the game and try and speedrun it as a new game that probably wouldn't be that fast as a speedrun, they really shouldn't be banning it, considering how incredibly popular the game is. Yeah, so yeah, unfortunately, even if you formed like a whole new speedrunning organization, you would have to convince half of the speedrunners that do games done quick to jump over to the new speedrunning organization to potentially make it successful. It's just gotten too corporate and moneyed interests have been too involved in it that there really could be much of a competition. It'd be the equivalent of trying to have your own like hot dog eating contest to compete against Nathan's hot dog eating contest in New York every year. You could do it, but it would just be so small and it wouldn't have the press and the coverage. Meanwhile, speedrunners don't really need an event to have their own stream if they already have fans, which is the big if. And the forums and all of that are basically run by Guinness. So you can speedrun and end up in the Guinness World Records book and not have anything to do with Games Done Quick events. You can also be a speedrunner that is just not particularly good on camera, but is particularly good at speedrunning, which is probably eliminating a decent amount of speedrunners from showing up on Games Done Quick. Moving on to Video Games Chronicle news, Hogwarts Legacy DLC is, quote, not currently planned, claims the developer. Avalanche Software suggests it's not currently thinking about post-release plans for the game. This might be one of those examples where it would potentially be better if a third-party company was working on DLC and then the first-party company was just polishing off the bugs of the main game and the main release. I hate the idea of DLC in general, certainly as most gamers do. But I could certainly see a desire to make new content. Maybe they won't do it as DLC, maybe they will do it straight up as a sequel. Inherently, Hogwarts Legacy has done the thing that needed to probably have been done 10 years ago when Harry Potter was really, really popular, which is they've made fairly high resolution 3D models of Hogwarts and surrounding areas, and they can build off that to potentially make multiple games. Like Hogwarts Legacy as a game itself is potentially closer to a mediocre game than you would like, but it's good enough. And that's really all that good enough is good enough. It's late to the party, certainly. Remember, Warner Brothers is just through this whole acquisition and mergers in a messy state, so at any point I could see the new people in charge of Warner Brothers and WB saying, yes, we are going to make more content for this, or they could say no. There is obviously a fairly lively mod scene already in Hogwarts Legacy, so if there was no storyline or gameplay mechanic additions, you could still have at least visual mods to take you pretty far. This is definitely a card that you could not play in modern times. And yet, it is massively defeating me with this. Honestly, I don't know if there's a way to win here, or if I should just surrender. Interesting. That's a glitch. That's gotta be a glitch. Inherently, I will say, too, if Hogwarts Legacy is introducing a new story in the Harry Potter universe, even if it's a prequel, it does open the door to more prequels or more story. And that's definitely what you want, is if you could throw out stories and concepts in video game form, comic book form, anything like that, that would just summon things, I guess, since we've got nothing else we can do. Problem is it's banishing everything. Is this guy gonna run out of cards before me? No. But yeah, the issue you're running into is that you have only the Harry Potter stories and then the Fantastic Beasts stories, which people I think lost interest in. I guess they're technically still working on Fantastic Beasts movies. I think there's one more at least they want to make there. But at this point, again, 10 years ago they should have been making Harry Potter comic books that would have sold, or Harry Potter in the same universe but set in different ways. It feels like there should be at least 7 other schools around instead of Hogwarts that they could have handed other creative directors to, and maybe this is just what's her name, the person who owns Harry Potter, not really allowing for that. But in my mind, there should have been other writers ghostwriting other schools and having other adventures. Like, at a certain point, it probably should come down to there being a chosen one like character in all the other schools to reveal that Harry Potter really wasn't that much of a chosen one, and there should be enemies like the enemy in Harry Potter to show he wasn't really that bad either. Or not that he wasn't that bad, but he wasn't the only threat. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Kenny Omega has confirmed the reason for AEW Fight Forever delay. The AE star also addressed the potential outdated roster. Let's see. The content had to be scaled back to meet the desired ESRB rating. I'm not too sure how much we had to scale it back, but man, I loved it. You can make the ring look like a murder scene if you wanted to. And I hope there's still some way to get some semblance of that. And then the other statement here is the game's front cover was recently changed to a previously prominently featuring CM Punk, former AEW champion whose status with the company is currently unknown due to a real-life bust-up with other members of the AEW, including Omega himself. So, yeah, there was that big fight. I don't know if I actually talked about that. I probably did when it happened, but there was a big, like, real-world fight that happened, and yeah, it's frankly a little surprising that it doesn't happen more often. All I'm doing is banishing cards here, which maybe for a lifetime goal of banishing a specific number of cards might be getting me some progress there, but this is really a point where I should just surrender, because I question whether there's even a single card here that defeats this, and unless I could get him to discard his entire hand and draw a new hand, he's not going to get anywhere close to running out of cards. I guess this is what Kenny Omega looks like in a cartoonized way. I'm not sure I fully would believe he doesn't have nipples, but or that he has all these muscles. I saw some kind of wrestling thing where it seemed rather pathetic, where it was the WWE female femme fatale wrestlers who, I haven't been paying a lot of attention to wrestling, maybe seen it once every 2 or 3 years. I see like one clip but they're running around to the corners of a caged in ring, not quite a Hell in a Cell because the cell isn't built directly onto the ring, so you can get out of the ring, but then there's a caged in section like locking in the outer parts of the ring, and then in each corner are these like telephone booths is what they look like, for lack of a better description. And they're these like plexiglass telephone booths with lights, LEDs in the corners, and it seems to me they are that they were hiding in that way more than wanting to actually wrestle, which that has been my impression in general, is that WWE doesn't want to get a wrestler, or very specifically I think Vince McMahon does not want to get a wrestler in there who is a muscly built bodybuilding wrestler lady like China. They want to get skinny, like fashion model type wrestlers who can do a little bit of aerobics and gymnastics certainly, and fake a couple of moves, but they just don't have the stamina, and they don't want to get scarred or hurt anyways. So it just does not come off anywhere as hardcore as the male wrestlers. But that has been their lineup. In all fairness, though, I would say compared to the decades previous with like China, there really are more prominent female wrestlers now, and they're getting more of a push to be promoted and shown off. There definitely were times in the 90s where you would have female wrestlers that were literally just the arm candy hanging off of male wrestlers, and maybe they would do one wrestling thing at the biggest events with females, and that would be about it. I guess I'll just keep on tribute summoning things too. This is taking forever. And at a certain point, wrestling is for kids, so I don't know if little kids really would appreciate if there was big muscly female wrestlers who were beating the hell out of each other and going extremely hardcore. On a certain level, that 90s era Mick Foley wrestling that I watched when I was a kid is probably not acceptable anywhere. If it is being done anywhere, it's probably at AEW. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Lego has issued a copyright strikes on videos featuring a leaked Zelda Lego set. Several sets, including some now confirmed by Lego, appeared online earlier this month. I guess I haven't seen any of these pictures, though, as far as a Lego Zelda set. But that pretty much confirms that it's happening. I've been horrifically bad with Lego recently. I haven't done any sets, and I have quite a backlog. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Basically, I'm falling asleep and just sleeping more and more than ever, or I'm trying to make pre-recorded footage for my YouTube channel and like potentially actually succeeding at my YouTube channel at a point where I might actually get monetized again. So at a very point, I might hit a point where all of a sudden I have 1,000 subscribers, but then I have nowhere close to the amount of watch time necessary, because my watch time actually isn't very high at this point. And there is an argument to maybe wait till you have like 2,000 subscribers before you have the amount of watch time necessary. That way, like, if you fall below 1,000 subscribers, you're not having a problem there where you're just falling out of the partner program again. But again, if you fall below the watch time, you'll also get kicked out of the partner program, the monetization on YouTube. Depending on what the set is, as far as a Lego Zelda set, I might be interested, but it very possibly is going to be like the Mario sets, in which it is the ugly blockheads characters, and it's much more of a play set and not very much a display set. Even the Nintendo display sets with the giant Bowser or the giant cube have all kind of missed the mark, in my feeling, and not caught my attention. But I definitely would like to see pictures when it happens. But yeah, I also need to stop buying Lego if I'm not going to put it together. The amount of Lego I've bought is way higher than what I was really originally planning on ever having in my life. I started off really doing only one set every year or two, and it has just grown and grown and grown to a massive amount. There was a PlayStation 5 Slick Deals I should mention also, which it was like $550 for the God of War Ragnarok bundle with an extra controller. So roughly about $700 worth of stuff. If you go to slickdeals.net, you can find where it was. It was like an eBay listing or something via eBay, so I don't think it was super shady, but it definitely, I don't think, was from a from like Amazon or Walmart or GameStop or anything big as a website. We're almost done with the Video Games Chronicle articles. Diablo 4's beta begins in March. Players who have pre-ordered will receive early access to the beta. This is the shadiest thing, certainly, of all, in that they have just created early access and then they are calling it beta. So they create early access to force you to pre-order games, so they can get your money earlier, and so you're less likely to back out if you start seeing reviews and seeing that Diablo 4 is particularly bad. Which, let's just think about that thought for a second. Is it possible? Wow, if I win here, this is going to be insane. Is it possible that Diablo 4 is bad? I think, yeah, quite a amount. Quite a high chance there, because we haven't seen a lot of footage of Diablo 4. It's always been in small little sections. You aren't really seeing anything amazing or being promised anything amazing. It feels like, in a lot of ways, Diablo 4 is just Diablo 3, maybe slightly more polished up, with a new story, focusing in on another brother or sister of Diablo, and then eventually I imagine we will fight Diablo himself. But yeah, I definitely am not super hyped around Diablo 4. I hope it's good. But yeah, they're trying to get you to pre-purchase the game before any reviews come out, and then they're using an open beta to excuse an unfinished product, which, in all fairness, I wouldn't be surprised if Diablo 4 is nowhere close to its final state for years, and that there will just be little tweaks here, little tweaks there for quite a while. Arguably now would probably be a better time to play Diablo 3 if you've never played Diablo 3, but I'm not sure that it's particularly a good time to play either Diablo 3 or Diablo 4, and it might be better just to go back and play Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 and pretend like 3 and 4 don't exist. Inherently, the Diablo series is built around a style of gameplay that just does not exist anymore, of sticking to one game for years and playing it over and over again. World of Warcraft is the last bastion of that style of gameplay, whereas I would prefer to play something, to use an example that we were talking about earlier, I prefer to play Bioshock 1, Bioshock 2, Bioshock Infinite, Judas when it comes out, Prey, and Atomic Heart, than to simply play Bioshock 1 5 times over. New content, even if it's not great content, is definitely my preference. Right, start with this, and do this, and toss this. Activate this. Find the 25 guy, toss him. Let's see, can we summon anything else out? Toss that in the graveyard. Add this one. Can I activate this twice? Nope. Do I want to set this guy? No. Do I want to set anything else? No. We can set this so this can't be destroyed by card effects. And attack. And in the turn. I do hope Diablo 4 is good. I will leave it at that, though. Video Games Chronicle says it looks like Returnal is off to a slow start on PC. The only Sony PC port to perform worse was Sackboy: A Big Adventure. In part, I think you run into several issues with Returnal, in that all the gameplay footage I've seen of it is very much a different type of game than I would have expected looking at like the screenshot. Maybe arguably the fact that you have kind of an older, let's just face it, uglier looking female base model doesn't help either. This is certainly no Samus Aran type character. But the problem more likely is that it's just too dark in its screenshots of gameplay, it's too dark in its material, too dark in its themes. Definitely didn't feel like it got enough of a advertising push by Sony anyways, but I don't know if it ever could have possibly been as successful as he might have wanted it to be. And arguably, I'm not sure it deserves to be much more successful than it is, because it really, in a funny way, is doing the Diablo thing too, where it's a game with randomly generating loot and they want you to play it over and over again, which, yeah, that doesn't particularly fly. Oh, darn it. Well, let's go ahead and set these and pretend like these are traps. Moving on, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom leaks seemingly emerge from official art book. The book, which is included with the collector's edition, may contain spoilers. Yeah. So, I guess watch out there. I honestly don't feel like there's probably that much that's going to be spoiled in Tears of the Kingdom, in the sense that almost certainly you're going to end up fighting Ganon again. Unless Tears of the Kingdom really is just going to be this open world DLC that doesn't even have a narrative connection. It's also funny that there are going to be these flying machines that you're putting together, almost like Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts, and all of a sudden they're making a game play mechanic that is just extremely different from the from what Zelda games have been so far. Yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, so much from what I've seen of Tears of the Kingdom feels very much like it is just taking Zelda further and further away from what it once was, and is oddly fascinated with mechanisms and machines. What? For each dragon in the field of the graveyard. Oh man. Well, clearly there's a strategy here I've been playing wrong, in which I should be putting more dragons in the graveyard. Like, I almost got a one-turn kill there. And it's gonna really suck, because in a couple days I'm gonna, basically tomorrow, I'm gonna have to start playing the Edda Festival, and I'm actually learning this deck pretty well. Let's see. Tesco UK is selling the God of War Ragnarok and Horizon for £15. The UK retailer is continuing to clear game stock at huge discounts in its physical stores. This is funny, they are showing a picture here of what I assume is actually Tesco. I think that says Tesco on his arm. But they're showing them like reducing the price of vegetables. And this is like the ugly vegetables, which is not even a fair comparison, because I don't think God of War Ragnarok or Horizon should be considered as a bruised or ugly vegetable. If anything, this is a great example of Video Games Chronicles just being so desperate to have a screenshot image, that every article has to have a screenshot image. Doesn't even matter what it is. Doesn't even matter, I imagine, if it's just a stolen image off of Google search and hasn't been properly licensed, that they are willing to go to any extreme of irrelevancy. But yeah, and again, Video Games Chronicle is a UK store, so there are no Tesco's outside of the UK as far as I understand it. So you couldn't get these deals unless you were in the UK anyways. Even if you did buy something like Deathloop for $5 on the PS5 and tried to import it, it may not play in the United States or outside in a different country. And the exporting there, I guess that would be exporting, not importing, probably would increase the cost past the point of it being a deal. Inherently, there's an example of where world trade and is only really good for big businesses and is not very helpful for most people that are just general consumers. But there have been times in Europe, particularly, where driving from one country, like from Germany to France, actually could be financially viable to drive to France, buy games cheaper in France and then drive back to Germany and play them. But that is only if you have interconnected highway systems and short distances. Compare that to the United States. Even if you are in one state in the United States, driving over to another state would probably take way more gas than it's worth it, or way more time than it's worth it to go to a different state, and almost certainly you wouldn't get any real discount going from one state to another to get a discount. Like, I have never seen for anything, let alone video games, a slick deals listing where it made sense to potentially drive from one city even to another city to get a discount. If we keep getting these disconnects, we may actually get all these rewards, get more legacy. Moving on with the news, UK games revenue declined in 2022 but is still well up on pre-pandemic levels. A new data suggests that UK games spending fell for the first time in a decade, which isn't much. This is an interesting store too, in that you have an Xbox One here and then just generic clothing here, and it seems like it's just a long line. And yeah, I have no idea what kind of store this would be. It says SAM, so I have no idea. Yep, I could see extra spending, entertainment spending, dropping in the UK in particular, as Brexit and the Ukraine invasion have both allowed probably for some price gouging in electrical gas heating bills to skyrocket. So I imagine people are getting squeezed and having less and less income. Moving on, the next Capcom Cup will award $1 million to the winner. The tournament will be the first Capcom Cup to feature Street Fighter 6. So I assume Capcom is putting up the prize money. Yeah, they very possibly are running the entire Capcom Cup. Now, inherently, compared to something like Evo, though, where there's multiple fighting games and multiple people coming around to participate in multiple fighting games and such, I imagine the Capcom Cup is considerably less well attended. Okay, let's start with that. Choose heads. There is a card that will make all coin flips turn it to heads in the first place. So if you have that manipulation with you, then yeah, you are in a better position at that point. Although I still don't think that strategy works amazingly well. If you could play a trap card where all coin flips land on heads, or that you can flip a coin a second time to increase your odds. The whole coin flip concept is a little slow and a little crazy in the fact that you just don't, you're then having to carry around a coin as a coin when you don't use the coin when playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In any other way. Or you don't use it often enough to justify carrying around the coin. Look at that, we are making quite a bit of progress. Last of Us trailer. Episode 7 will cover the games left behind DLC. Okay, whatever. I'm totally checked out on that point. Miyamoto says Nintendo is always working on Mario but isn't ready to share anything yet. The Nintendo veteran also says he, quote, love to work on with new technologies given the chance, which I guess that means he'd love to work with a new Switch 2 or work with VR or augmented reality. I can't imagine that there's too many other technologies ready to come out that would integrate with video games very well. I think I saw an article here that says he was also like working with his hands more, which I didn't understand what that meant. Maybe that was a typo. For as old as Shigeru Miyamoto actually is, he looks pretty good in this screenshot. He's probably had some work done. But Asians also just age fairly gracefully. I think he probably is in his late 60s, early 70s. And at a certain level, there is definitely an argument that he's going to have to step down or slow down a little bit. Of course, Japanese people don't tend to ever slow down. In a lot of ways, just skimming this article, this feels like a very standard article that most video game developers should give, and that they should say yes to everything and just say, yeah, we'd love to do that, but we don't have anything to share at this time. Just make everything positive. There's really no reason to shoot down any ideas or concepts in an interview unless you're just desperately needing to establish set expectations, I guess. I really doubt that we would see a Switch that is a VR headset. Even if we did see a Switch that was a VR headset, it would be so underpowered, and it would paint just yet another generation of Nintendo games focused around gimmicks, when, if anything, late into this point, we should be fairly obvious that the gimmicks are hurting the development of standard Nintendo games, or just a good game that you could potentially resell on a later device. Even the Wiimotes have become an albatross around the necks of Nintendo, in that they are increasingly not using any of the Wiimote gimmick elements, and they're just making a standard game that could be ported to PC very easily and just played with a fairly standard controller. At a certain level, instead of making a VR headset, why not just make a pair of Ray-Bans and make that the main hardware gimmick for the next Switch? To just by default have a kind of rechargeable point on a Switch where you could put them in and then they would wirelessly recharge up, and then when you want to play, you snap them out of that holder on the Switch and stick them in your ears. That would make parents a lot happier, certainly, as far as just not having to hear the beeps and boops of video games while not getting the full context of what's going on. And it potentially could have better audio. The idea of even an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5 having, by default, some kind of Ray-Ban style, Apple AirPod style earbuds would be probably very helpful. I'm bumping my controller, so the controlling prompts are popping up. Yeah, that probably is the first step before even doing VR. Is just, hey, let's improve the audio a little bit, even though people don't care about the audio. So yeah, I imagine nobody would ever actually do that. Although, connecting to this next Video Games Chronicles story, I wouldn't have imagined that the Xbox Series X price would get risen again, this time in Sweden. They increased the price in Japan. If anything, this highlights, I think, the stupidity of whoever is in charge of Xbox in Japan. This is just a couple months, really. It feels like they have gotten to the point where the Xbox was actually selling fairly decently in Japan. Well, at least a lot better. It went from the Xbox Series X selling 1 copy in all of Japan, or 10 units in all of Japan, to them selling hundreds of units. So as soon as they started to see any real sales there, they raised the price, probably because of the part shortage. I see on the chat someone wants to challenge me. Basically, I'm saying no to all challenges at this point. It doesn't get the daily quest done. Right now is particularly a terrible time to try to challenge anybody, as there's a festival going on right now that I'm doing to get rewards, and then there's another festival. Another festival starting in a matter of hours. And frankly, I will also say, I don't pay attention enough to Yu-Gi-Oh! To look at other players' decks. So people wanting to show off their decks doesn't mean anything to me, because I will not understand or pay any attention to what your decks are. Anyway, so it would not be a learning experience for me. So sorry. But yeah, I've been saying no. At some point, if Yu-Gi-Oh! Allows you to get daily quests by playing friends, I'll reevaluate this policy, but it doesn't at the moment. It would be kind of nice if you got extra rewards for playing against friends, but they'll never do that. Moving on with the news, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is getting a final bug fix update this week, which I guess means they are done adding any bug fixes to Valhalla. And as far as they are concerned, it is now bug-free. I imagine that is probably not actually the truth, but yeah. There is still very much a level of a far too fast churn around the Assassin's Creed games that I would prefer be addressed. Let's go equip this. I probably should have equipped that, come to think of it. I've never gotten back to the Assassin's Creed series after playing the first 4 Assassin's Creed games. And yeah, see, if I had put 600 there, this would have been at 3,000. I could have potentially attacked it again. But yeah, and it's very questionable whether if I did get back into the Assassin's Creed games, whether I should just skip 3 and go straight to Black Flag. Play Black Flag, skip everything until Assassin's Creed Origin, and then play Assassin's Creed Origin, and then Odyssey, and then maybe Valhalla, but maybe just skip Valhalla. 2, there's a lot of content that can be skipped. In all fairness, I will say it has been a while since I've played an Assassin's Creed style game where you're climbing around and finding collectibles, if that is really what you are doing with Assassin's Creed style games nowadays. Finally. Okay, well, nothing's gonna win here, so I might as well just attack with the 24 and see what that does. The game For the King 2 trailer shows off some of the sequel's new features. I don't know what For the King 2 is, and I don't think I saw For the King 1. Apparently a $550 emulation console called the Polymega is now getting a free app version, which I'm sure people are not happy about that, going from paying $550 to a free version, although perhaps you only can do the free version if you own the $550 console, or perhaps you have to rent each game if you get the free app version, whereas where you get all the games there. Although the emulation consoles in general, your first concept there is that you're stealing all the ROMs, or you have legal backups of all the ROMs, so you wouldn't be expecting that you would pay more for games, even on the free amp version of this. I haven't heard of this one. At this point, though, none of them are worth it. Like, it's far too expensive to get a Raspberry Pi, even 3B Plus, and you probably want a Raspberry Pi 4 B Plus, or 4B, whatever is the most recent Raspberry Pi 4, to emulate NES up to Nintendo 64 games, and even at that, Nintendo 64 games are going to be kind of rough, even on the Raspberry Pi 4. It's almost there, but not quite. But it's just far too expensive. You probably would spend somewhere around $130 for a Raspberry Pi 4 right now. Once you start adding a case and a micro SD card to it, and a plug, and an HDMI cord, and a wireless controller, or a plugged-in controller. Once you've added all of that, you are so incredibly close to buying a Steam Deck in its mid-tier, the like $500 Steam Deck. Well, you'd be really close to the low-tier Steam Deck, but you would be close enough, honestly, to buy the mid-tier Steam Deck at that point. And the Steam Deck really has just made such a better offering that any emulation console new like this is ridiculous. This is the price of a mid-tier Steam Deck, so why not just have a mid-tier Steam Deck? But even the Raspberry Pi has lost its focus, and inherently you've run into this problem with the Raspberry Pi, in that if you're not using it for emulation, there's a question as to whether you need all the features that a Raspberry Pi offers as far as processing power and such. And then if you are using it for emulation, there's a question whether you need the pins and connectable features and programmability to make a device of some sort, usually something close to an Internet of Things device, smart device. So it's become this jack of all trades, master of none as far as the Raspberry Pi, and even they know that, and that's why they've introduced the Raspberry Pi RP2040, Raspberry Pi Picos, which are much smaller microcontrollers for making Internet of Things type devices. And well, that didn't work quite as well as I would have liked. And then the standard Raspberry Pis have also been split into compute modules for a lot of the accessories, and like USB ports and Ethernet ports that you may not need. So the Raspberry Pi really has become a development board to build something that you would then use a compute module for later on, if you're even going to do that, or you use a Raspberry Pi Pico for a smaller project. That being said, I still think a Raspberry Pi is probably a good little toy for kids to learn on. And when they get bored with programming it to do something special, then you can install a very slow, lightweight version of Linux on it. Or more likely, install an emulation RetroPie build on it. And I'm gonna hook this, and then do this, and send that. Let's go ahead and do this. Summon something here. I'm gonna run out of cards at this rate. Okay, let's hope we can win here. No. There we go. Let's attack. I don't want to stop as long as I'm winning and as long as I'm getting rewards, so this entire stream I may be fairly focused around just playing. That being said, if I am fairly focused around playing, yeah, I'm gonna go really long. Alright, so we're now at the Gamatsu video game news from Gamatsu. Bill and Ted's excellent retro showcase for the PS5, PS4, and Switch is now available. No screenshots available for what was an NES and Game Boy game. I did see one YouTuber call this out as being basically an example of re-releases that potentially don't need to exist because you could just emulate them, and I can't really buy into that argument, but it is a very odd re-release. Selling it for $10 is probably way too expensive when it arguably should be a $2.99, so cheap that it doesn't even matter. And certainly a retro collection should include more than just 2 games, but I don't know what else you could include in that. It's sad that we can't cross the barrier and say buying this retro collection also gets you Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, or Bill and Ted's what was the second one, or Bill and Ted's Face the Music, the third movie. Like, if you could get a ownership of those 3 movies on top of the 2 games, that would be interesting. Or even music and soundtrack, or even just like music and soundtrack effects on these games. But yeah, if you were going to resell Bill and Ted's, it feels like that should have been given away as part of a bigger collection of other retro old games instead of its own standalone things. We talked about how Diablo 4 open beta test is set for March 24th to 26th, and early access people who pre-ordered get it March 17th through 18th. Now obviously if you're getting early access though, you're still playing the beta. You're just playing an even earlier version of the beta. The graphics on this screenshot do probably highlight some niceness as far as just modern cutscenes, but actually when you're playing Diablo 4, you're gonna still have that top-down perspective, and it might be a little bit better, and it might be a game that looks really great if you're playing it on a 2K or 4K screen and doesn't look that much better at 1080p. I also feel like they've changed the body model on this succubus character, or maybe just in this cutscene, because I felt like she had more scale armor and red skin, and now they seem to have scaled it down to cloth shirt and white skin. Yeah. An intro cinematic here. Let me not show this because it might get content ID'd even though it's blurred. Actually, why am I bothering to blur things if I'm not going to show it? Let's see. So, skimming in this in-game cinematic, it's very much focusing on this character to start with. And now we're into incredibly dark screenshots. So maybe this story is taking place in a more northernly environment to start with. But yeah, this definitely feels like this is what the game is actually going to look like there. And in-game intro cinematic there, not particularly interesting to look at. A side-scrolling platformer, Magical Delicacy, has been announced for Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC. Here you have probably Westerners trying to do a kind of anime-inspired art style, although there is some anatomy problems, I would say, fairly obviously here, in that this cleavage seems to be all over the place. This cleavage is a little off. This cleavage over here looks a little off. Heads perhaps a little too big and inconsistent. Cat ears. I won't complain about somebody having cat ears, but this neck is way too long. This neck is way too long. Oops. I surrendered because I wasn't paying attention enough. Arguably, maybe that is my indicator to stop playing at this point. The stream will go too long. This is now currently open too, so like I probably will want to try and play off screen and have more victories on that first festival and eat into my time, as it were, for the rest of the festival. This Festival February event was way too late. If they were going to have festivals all throughout February just because it rhymes, they should have done that. And apparently some of these quests are overlapping, which I guess maybe that helps a little bit. So, Duel in the Festival is all done. Activate trap cards. Activate spell cards. Win in a duel. Destroy cards. Special summon monster cards. We can click here to go faster, by the way. And I do need to do that going forward. So now, the XYZ Festival, XYZ Summon in the Festival needs to happen here, and then we need to just duel in either festival. As far as daily quest 2, I have a Ritual XYZ. I don't even have a solo mode story. I don't have a dual live to do today either. And then of course the lifetime stuff. And slowly we'll make progress through all of this. Very, very slowly making progress through all of this. And after I get all the lifetime stuff done, that's going to be your last opportunity to really get any gems. XYZ Festival is now underway. As for the solo mode stuff, yeah, I got as far as this one, and then I started playing Prey, so I still have like 2 solo stories, plus I have several things that I would need to do to get full complete. They also added this dual restart, which doing dual restart now does not make any sense at all. Like, it only makes sense that you would do the tutorial, then do dual restart, then dual training. So if you're new to Yu-Gi-Oh, by all means do the solo modes. Do all these solo modes as much as you can. You'll end up starting off in a much better position, but eventually you'll get to a point where it's not so much worth your time and you can just move on to playing ranked. Alright, so this game, Magical Delicacy, despite anatomy and long necks, when you actually look at it, is more of a zoomed out game. Looks like it has a cooking gameplay mechanic to it. Seems to me like what they've done here is they've taken one image here and then copy and pasted that same image to this image and to this image. So it seems very much like they've made only one zoomed in image for the entire game, which doesn't seem like a lot of effort. The game's Lies of P launches in August. It's a Souls-like action RPG game, somewhat around the idea of Pinocchio. That being said, I think the Pinocchio connection is probably not very much. And I don't have time to really watch this month's release month trailer, so we'll just skip it. Check it out on Gematsu if you're interested. Layers of Fear launches in June. It is no longer titled Layers of Fears with an S. This is a I believe remaster of Layers of Fear, or remake of Layers of Fear 1, although I don't know where the lighthouse is coming from, if that's it. Layers of Fear, the series crowning definitive way to experience a critically acclaimed franchise of Layers of Fear 1 and Layers of Fear 2, as well as all downloadable content, including the new downloadable content to Final Note that will give you a new perspective on Layers of Fear's storyline. So, yeah. This is a effort for them to sell Layers of Fear a second time, basically, or the Layers of Fear series a second time. And I can't particularly blame them, because the price will probably be somewhat right to merge all the games together. And it's a shame for people who own the game already on Steam. They probably won't get a discount. But the first Layers of Fear game was a little lackluster in its actual gameplay. It is just a horror walking simulator, and they made more content, they made more DLC, they got better, I think, on the DLC of Layers of Fear 1. I never played Layers of Fear 2. It would be kind of stupid to play Layers of Fear 2 as it is when this new horror reimagined Layers of Fear concept will give you that content anyways. It definitely feels like Bloober Team is trying to make a good product here. I'm not sure if they're going to succeed greatly at that. Right now, the original version of the game is $20, which is probably too expensive, and they're kind of heavily promoting the Blair Witch game from 2021. Observer, not particularly well received, and it's too expensive at $29.99. There is definitely either a need or a desire to make a lot of money here, and then they have VR versions of Layers of Fear and Observer, and a VR version of that. Medium being a game that I think they've probably forgotten about, or maybe they're trying to bring up income that they could fix that or continue the Medium game. I don't feel like the Medium game was amazingly well received, but it is rated very positively, so I might be wrong about that. Whereas Layers of Fear 2 from 2019 is mostly positive. Observer underscore versus Observer remake System Redux. It's just like they're remaking every game they've made after Layers of Fear. They're not remaking any of their older games, which makes sense. It is a weird situation, certainly, when you see a company that is just trying, and you want to potentially reward the effort of saying, hey, we maybe didn't do this quite right, let's make a remaster, let's make a remake, let's combine a bunch of DLC that we overcharged for and try and sell it the second time. Inherently, because it's a horror game, it's always going to be in this niche market, and it's going to have fewer sales than a non-horror game of equal quality, if you could make a game of equal quality. But then on the other hand, maybe they are just not learning fast enough, or they're making remakes so they can learn Unreal Engine 5 to make some other kind of game. Or maybe they've taken the note that the Medium didn't sell well, and so they have to lean back into things that did sell well to raise more income. Seems almost like they don't want to work with a publisher, or publishers don't want to work with them, because I think if they had a new game idea and a new game pitch, they could probably get a publisher to help fund them work on a new game for the next 4 to 6 years and just be done with Layers of Fear. And hopefully with this remake that would be the end of it, because they can't really remake anything else at this point. Moving on, Proto Droid Delta launches on April 27th for the PC, PS4, Switch, and Xbox One. It's a 3D action platform in a solar punk world. It looks kind of cartoony, for whatever that really means. Yeah, looks like it's a infinite runner platforming game with, what I would call cartoony animation style. This is what I would expect to see on a Saturday morning cartoon, as far as trying to look Japanese, like Robotech inspired with a mech suit, but not really in an anime style that you would expect in either a early morning kids anime in Japan or a late night adults anime in Japan. Yeah, not anything particularly interesting from that, though. And in all fairness, well, this does kind of feel like a Code Lyoko or Reboot type animation style. The cartoons that I've seen recently, and I don't watch a lot of cartoons or pay a lot of attention to new cartoons, have not gone into this, let's try to make it look a little CGI and computer generated style, or even robot style. Like, you look at the new Pokemon, and that is very flat, colorful, smooth curved lines animation style, and with the exception of things like Transformers, the most recent cartoons are definitely not going for the sci-fi look. Honestly, this is probably just not what the sci-fi look looks like in modern times. Nobody thinks that in the future we'll have power suits and technology like that. Everybody probably thinks you just have like a cell phone and for the most part look like what the current world looks like. You just have slightly better technology that would be incredibly small, if not built into simple small devices or your brain. Moving on, don't need to talk about that much. Read-only Memories Neurodiver launches Q3 of 2023. We'll leave it at that. Do we have a specific release date? Nope. 9 Years of Shadows launches March 27th for PC and then Q3 for the Switch. So we really are just getting Q3 announcements now. We're in February and already we're at the point where video games are being announced for the third quarter of the year. And it probably will only be 2 or 3 more months before we start to see most video games announcing for the end of the year of 2023. It probably will only be a month. And then things will start getting pushed back to 2025. I like this character design. This, if anything, this is kind of the art style I would want to see if you're trying to make something that feels like it's an old 8-bit game, when this really is not an 8-bit game. It has way more color palettes and way more resolutions and definitely way bigger sprites. Yeah, I would like to watch this trailer, though. Yeah, I guess it's dealer's choice as far as whether or not. Now, it's a little weird you have a floating teddy bear with you. So you're jumping around, hacking and slashing with a battle axe. Yep. This feels like the Saint Seiya anime, and as far as the armor is going. Which, okay. Is it the same character switching into different types of armor to play kind of a Metroidvania game? Or is it multiple characters? Yeah, I think it's the same character in different types of armor. So it is basically a Metroid game. And so far what I've seen is it doesn't feel like it's an incredibly difficult precision platforming game where you're gonna die on spikes over and over again. So, yeah. I find this somewhat attractive. The only thing I find slightly weird is the floating teddy bear character. And it is a interesting twist in that you have a big, I believe this is called a halberd. Yeah, maybe. Like this big axe with a spike on it on a long stick. There aren't too many characters with weapons like that. And honestly, at this point, I am just going to put things on the fall list if they really catch my attention, even though they don't have a release date that's particularly close to now. Apparently Steam is doing a fan fest at this point too. This week's Japanese games releases: the PlayStation VR 2, Like a Dragonation, Octopath Traveler 2, Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe, and more. Grim Guardians. Man, I don't know if the scale is right here, but it's probably, this is actually even bigger than the scale of the size of these games. If anything, I would imagine you would try to make the PlayStation VR box either be in line with the PlayStation 5 box, although it seems like really long, or you try to make it the same height and depth of a PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4 game, and then just incredibly long even at that, and that seems like what they've gone for. There's more digital games also being released. Let's see, they've moved the hardware to the top here, when usually the hardware is at the bottom of these lists, and then the actual physical and digital releases, it's quite a lot of different games with different versions. But if you got rid of the versions, it still feels like there'd be quite a bit of games here. And then digitally, just a really long list. So I don't think we're in Golden Week in Japan, but maybe we are, or maybe they're getting back from Golden Week, and or maybe this is just the time in which games are going to start being put on sale in Japan in particular, or maybe it's just the time in which games are being put on sale anywhere, because we're finally out of the January-February slump, or starting to leave the January-February slump when there are no games available. Rune Factory 3 special gameplay, a full Days of Fantasy, is here, 10 minutes of footage. Yeah, this is much closer to what I imagine a Western, like Cartoon Network Saturday morning cartoon would look like, even though this is going with the Moe art style. I would definitely call this the Moe art style. Big heads, shorter limbs, shorter bodies. We still are hitting a point, though, where a lot of these RPGs are doing kind of low effort 3D CGI characters for most of the gameplay, and then you get one good looking flat image of the character that you can look at when they're actually having conversations. Even this animation, though, and the 3D CGI are still completely inconsistent with the teaser art or trailer art here. Moving on, 9 RIP launches June 29th in Japan for the Switch. It is a otome young maiden visual novel about being spirited away, which I'm not sure what they mean by spirited away in particular. There was the movie Spirited Away by Ghibli, but maybe that phrase means something more in Japanese. And yeah, might be somewhat worth looking at. I guess the word spirit away, the phrase, probably means a spirit shows up and takes you away to an afterlife, and in the way of an otome visual novel, that probably means there's a young maiden and then 9 spirits trying to convince the young maiden to fall in love with him and leave to another world with him. Moving on, Hakyoki Sweet School Life for Switch launches June 15th in Japan. It's currently available only for the PS Vita. So it's been a long while since we've seen a Vita game get re-released for anything. And inherently we're seeing all the visual novels move over to the Switch, and no interest so far as moving things to PlayStation 5 in particular. We have seen some games getting released on PlayStation 4, but it's only been fairly recently that we've had a large amount of sales of PlayStation 5s in Japan, and putting a visual novel on the PlayStation 5 is pretty overkill anyways. Honestly, there is a higher chance that we'll see these otome visual novels games, and just visual novel creators in general, skipping over directly to mobile games, because yeah, it's not like you really need anything more than a cell phone to play a visual novel. It might be a little hard to read the screen on a mobile phone compared to even a Switch screen, but yeah, even reading the text on a Switch game is going to be somewhat difficult. Moving on, Assault Suits Valken Declassified has been announced for the Switch. This definitely feels like an old 90s anime with mech suits. Apparently, it seems like there was some kind of Nintendo Direct in Japan in particular, because these are all Nintendo Switch announcements. But maybe they didn't actually have a Direct. This definitely looks like an old game. A game called Superpowers X Academy RPG has been teased for the PS5, PS4, and Switch. This being an RPG game does have much more justification to come to the PlayStation, and we'll probably start to see more and more things come to the PS4 and PS5, and I bet in a year we'll probably start to see things become more PlayStation 5 exclusives. I wouldn't be surprised if we never really see PlayStation 5 exclusives from Japanese game developers, and it's until we're like well into PlayStation 6. Let's see. The Atelier Marie remake, The Alchemist of Salzburg, launches July 13th. I did find out that this is a remake of the first Atelier game in the series, so there is definitely a justification if you wanted to get into the Atelier series that you might want to play this. They have totally remade what would have been 8-bit pixel graphics in the chibi 3D CGI 3D model style, and then basically asset flipped a bunch of the environments and stuff and remaking all that. So you still are having that weird disconnect when you get into a menu, you get nice flat animation, and in the background it's just the chibi 3D. But it's probably better than just reselling the same game or emulating the old games. I wish they would just go the full direction though, and animate new flat 2D sprites that are in line with this, and do the extra work, which would probably be a lot of work, certainly. But yeah, and since this is the first Atelier game, they aren't really going with the Moe style in this flat animation anyway, so you get almost this rare gem of here's what the mid-90s, early 90s anime was like, where characters were actually tall and their heads were somewhat in line with the art of body proportions, and their arms and legs were in line. But then you get the exact opposite of that with the chibi, in which their heads are gigantic and their arms and legs are incredibly misproportioned, and incredibly short. I have to assume that even in this first game, the Atelier series probably has more of a story to it to push you through what would be the basics of an RPG experience. But it very well is the case that Atelier Marie is not really a game that you would be nostalgic for or want to play, particularly as a Westerner, if you weren't so happy around the most recent Atelier games, Atelier Ryza series in particular. On that point, Atelier Ryza 3 Alchemist of the Endless Secret Key story trailer is available. It is interesting, certainly, to see where the animation styles have gone from the first Atelier series to the first Atelier game to the most recent Atelier game, in that all cutscenes now are in 3D modeling, but the textures are still somewhat going with a flat 2D anime color palette and textures on the face. Noticeably, there's less cleavage and less skin showing than ever in modern games, so we've kind of regressed from oh, let's show some cleavage, let's show some stuff. While this character is kind of loved for her thick hips and thighs, which aren't even being shown in that image, that's really all you're getting in her outfit is just these shorts and thighs, bit of shoulder, bit of forearm, no real cleavage. You look at some of these other characters, you get some more legs. Seems like there's a guy character that's totally shirtless, which, okay, fair enough. Then you have full armor lady, almost full armor lady, almost full armor lady, full armor, fully clothed guy, maybe a somewhat shirtless guy here, fully covered. Yep, it is quite a drastic shift as far as just where the games in Japanese animation has gone, as far as more and more push, probably from puritanical Westerners, to cover up the characters more and more. And it's not just a Ryza series. This has been a growing trend over the past few years, in which more and more characters who more than likely would have had more skin showing are getting covered up, and even the Asian versions of games showing skin, and then the Western versions of skin of games covering it up. Body shaming is really what it should be called, frankly. We are in an age of video game body shaming of characters or animators, and where we previously were more of an age of body positivity or body exhibitionism, not to any real extreme sense. But moving on to the next Gematsu article, Gran Turismo 7 version 1.29 update launches February 21st, adding new cars, truck, PlayStation VR 2 support, and a limited time Gran Turismo Sophie Trophy event. Seems like there's a lot of variety in the types of cars they're showing in that screenshot. It's also weird that you have like these cars that don't even seem like they have windshields you can look out of. Your mileage will definitely vary, though, based on just whether or not you care about Gran Turismo on an announcement like that. Redfall has the World of Redfall trailer, which Redfall has been trying to catch people's attention left and right. Now, I'm playing Prey right now, and so I don't know if Arcane Studios Austin were the people who made Prey, or if it's literally just a new studio they called Arcane Studios Austin. But Redfall has done an incredibly bad job of explaining what it is and getting people to understand what it is and getting people interested in what it's offering. I really would love to see Redfall become a surprise hit, but it almost seems like Arcane Studios, particularly with Prey, is just trying to remake other people's games and see if they can do it slightly better. If this turned out to be, well, they're saying it's much more like Far Cry. If this game turned out to be Far Cry, if this turned out to be like Far Cry, but better, that would be interesting, certainly, because Far Cry has run into a lot of problems in which there are usually one or two bad Far Cry games for every good Far Cry game, and sometimes the good Far Cry games are just DLC. So, yeah, if somebody could do it better and actually compete, that'd be great. Arcane Studios and Bethesda definitely feels like one of the few companies out there that is actually trying to compete by stealing ideas, being second to market, and just copying ideas and seeing if they could take that idea and spin on it. Like, when you think of a game like Bioshock 1, you would have thought that there would have been several companies in the decade after that that would have tried to copy that, and they didn't even really try to copy the gameplay mechanics, let alone try and make anything differently. I feel like game developers are perhaps a little bit afraid of being accused of stealing ideas when inevitably they are stealing ideas whether they realize it or not, and they should be stealing more ideas and learning from each other, and growing and feeding off each other's artistic designs. It's not like famous musicians aren't influenced by other musicians, or famous painters aren't influenced by other painters. But yeah, I can only say I hope Redfall is a surprise hit. I suspect it will probably not sell well enough for Microsoft / Bethesda's liking. Moving on, a PC smartphone game called Terra Nil launches March 28th. Seems to me like it's a simulation game. It maybe has a little bit more to do with nature than just building cities. A game called Raven's Watch for PC launches in early access on April 6th. It's also coming out to the PS5 and Xbox Series when it's fully released. This one screenshot looks kind of interesting, but it doesn't really give me a good impression of what kind of game it actually is. Let's see if this trailer can explain it better. Yeah. Seems like it's a tilted perspective, probably hack and slash game. No, more of a top-down hack and slash game. If anything, this may be a case where they need to get this game out fairly quickly because there is a high danger that this is going to pale in comparison to Diablo 4. Yep. That's another thing, certainly, as far as being influenced by other game developers. As soon as Activision Blizzard announced Diablo 4 is in development, anybody who was making a top-down hack and slash type game needed to rush as fast as possible to release their games before that point, or potentially slow down and release their game after any hype around Diablo 4 has happened. The idea of Raven's Watch as a name sounds intriguing. The game OU has been delayed to summer, no longer due out in spring. This looks like this is a point-and-click adventure game, if I was to guess. And then NCSoft announces a multiplayer battle action game called Battle Crush for Switch, PC, and mobile, which definitely seems like we are getting yet another game that is either going to be like Multiversus, where it's not going to be that interesting, or it's going to be one of those games that just gets announced and then not supported for very long because it doesn't come out of the gate running. There does seem to be a slight gimmick here in that it seems like the ground falls out beneath you, and there's some element there. Almost feels like it's trying to be a 3D Smash Brothers. Let me see if my blur is enabled now. Okay. Turn off the blur on top of the blur. And we'll start looking at the games that came out on Steam and try and burn through these. Fiery Rivaz. This doesn't look terrible as a side-scrolling shooter. This character does kind of feel like it was probably just a cheap asset 3D model they got. So I think I probably would just say generously yes to this. We've gotten just like this 3D model of a character. This feels almost like a porcelain doll, though the proportions in 3D with the big forehead and the tan skin tone dress here seems a little off, a little creepy, uncanny valley like. Then this version of the image is just the version of this. I'm going to be extremely generous and make a YouTube short around that. Grip on reality, not chip on reality. Doesn't look like anything. Infinimine. I feel like there's a different game called Infinimine or Infinity Mine. And this doesn't look good. Cargo Truck Simulator 2023. Doesn't look good. Beat the Soul Z. I'll be generous and give that a chance. Random Blacksmith Game. Doesn't look like anything. Axioms Box. Looks like it's a parkour game. Basically an asset flip parkour game, so know that. Dead Island Zombie Hunter. What's funny here is I don't think this has anything to do with Dead Island. I feel like you very possibly don't own the copyright to the phrase Dead Island, and that might be in part the problem with the game being called Dead Island. So you have a VR game here. Doesn't look terrible. Let's see, we have one user review. Should we listen to it? I have been deceived with the iconic name like Dead Island Zombie Hunter. You'd expect a fast action zombie killing game with weapon crafting, gory blood, decapitating, good time. Instead, we got an unlicensed standstill 180 wave shooter where zombies only walk straight towards you. Alright, well, that's enough for me to say no. Yeah, I imagine this is unlicensed is perhaps the wrong word. It's just that the phrase Dead Island is probably not copyrightable. They should have, at some point, if they really cared about the Dead Island series, they should have created something that was in front of the title. Something like Outbreak Dead Island or Barbados Dead Island, Bahamas Dead Island. Something that perhaps would stand better to be copyrighted and or trademarked. Was Dead Island. Feels like there's probably a movie or something called Dead Island. This game feels like it's one of these RPG makers that might have a uncensored patch at some point or might not. It does have some interesting art style in this little princess living in a castle art style, but the actual game is probably more of this and this than you would like. So no to that. Operation Aronta. See, this is a great example of a good name. Not a good game by any means, but a good name that you could at least trademark or fight for. Notes of the Young Lady in Turbulent Times. Looks like it's a Chinese game. Maybe a Chinese daughter raising sim. Regardless, well, it's Korean, not Chinese. I was wrong about that. But it doesn't support English, so I can't do anything with it anyways, and I wouldn't do anything with it because it's kind of all over the place visually. Shadow of Night. Dead Island 2 or 3, I don't even know what number they're up to, is coming out fairly soon. And I imagine it won't blow people out of the water. Shadow Knight, not quite polished. It would be a hard sales pitch for any survival game to catch my attention. Striving for the light survival. Looks like it's just a vampire survivors games. Which, you know what, I'll give it a chance. It looks good enough. Yeah. I definitely am in a weird position. Once a game became popular like Vampire Survivors, in my mind, then you know there's going to be a bunch of clones, but that doesn't mean that the clones are inherently bad. So here we have our first adult game for this Monday. We should see some adult games. Dog Days literally seems like it's just color puzzles, but there does seem to be some furry porn involved in it. Let's see what the mature content. Nudity, adult only, sexual materials, what it says. It says it has full audio for every language. So yeah, I question in this case whether you actually even get to see any nudity here, or if it is just fur covered, furry, anthropomorphic animals. Every screenshot here is just showing color puzzles. So this might be a trick to sell something that is a very low effort game by putting it in the adult section. This developer, I believe, if I was to see him, has made like 3 different furry games, and that's it. Let's see, next we have Sally Can't Sleep. This is probably a joke game, but I'll give it a follow just to be generous, but I'm not going to make a shorter on it because it's visually not interesting enough. Tartarus, Longo, Ithini looks interesting enough. Over this weekend we should have seen at least a couple of adult games. With the perhaps exception between Mondays and Wednesday streams, we should see at least a couple of adult games. This looks like garbage now. Cyber Rat with X's all around it. Yeah, I don't think visually this is interesting enough. Feels like this is a hacking game where you're going to spend most of your time in front of a computer screen trying to hack, and then every now and then you're going to jump out of the hacking screen and have maybe a monster attack you as a horror element. There's another game series that's like that. It's weird. My Lovely Pets Collector's Edition. Yeah, I won't put that on the fall list, but I'll give it a YouTube short. My Dream Setup. I guess the question really comes down to, what does your dream setup mean? To me, as a PC gamer, a setup would be the monitor, the mouse, the keyboard, the PC, maybe the desk. If you have a ring light for cameras and stuff like that, perhaps accent lighting if it's directly connected or related to your PC. But I really wouldn't consider shades or posters on the wall or bookshelves part of a setup. I guess though, if I was videoing myself, having bookshelves around the background for background design makes some sense. At a certain point though, I definitely would not consider a bed part of your setup. It would be the general setup of your room, certainly, but it's building the room you always dreamed of, and that's what they're focusing on. Interesting. Which, it may be a sad statement, certainly, as far as just people only being able to imagine building a room that they dreamed of, whereas ideally you would want a whole house. Like for me, I've got a whole room that's either dedicated to or being wasted full of Lego. There's a whole kitchen and dining room and bathrooms and bedrooms and just like if you need an office is also there. As far as my dream house would go, I'd probably want even more rooms so that there are specific places I could go. They definitely say that you should have like an office and get up and like get dressed and cleaned and bathed and go into your home office and treat that as your work and stay locked in that home office like that as your office at work and be in that different environment and mental mindset, and then have a bedroom. They say shouldn't even have TVs in it, and it should just be about sleeping, just a quiet, small, cozy place to sleep. So, decorating a room that's going to have a bed and a computer in it is very much a distraction. This looks like an interesting enough visual novel, I assume is what it is. So I'll give it a chance. Your turn to die, death by majority. So is this in a Among Us game or I don't know, it almost feels like it's supposed to be a Danganronpa type game, but the animation feels weird, to say the least. Probably not good, to say a little bit more. Is it a single player game even, with the phrase death by majority? Well, here's a great example of me just getting overruled by Mob Rule. This is incredibly positive and highly reviewed. So I'll give it a YouTube short and see what people have to say about it. If anything, as these YouTube shorts become more and more popular, here we have another adult game. When Sword Sinks into Flowers. This feels like this might be a guy-on-guy yaoi gay game, but still seems to have the RPG Maker element mostly as the main gameplay. Well, nope. That is a guy on a girl, quite literally. So maybe it's a case that the girl is dressed as a guy for most of the gameplay. Yeah. It does seem like that is the case. Is that you're playing as this masculine looking female dressed as a guy, and then the other guys are going after you, but the actual nudity here shows female breasts. Now, interestingly, this is Japanese only as far as the language. It's $5.99, so even if I were going to say yes to this, I really couldn't. And they're selling it as an otome young maiden adventure game in a Western fantasy setting, which is interesting keywords to certainly use. But yeah, it definitely feels more like it could have been a yaoi and they just added breast later on. Johnny Lionface. I don't think there's quite enough visual polish on this. I'll be generous though. It really doesn't hurt to be a little generous on these games. That being said, things like this game, pretty easy to dismiss. Or this game, easy to dismiss. Let's see, Meta Art Metaverse. Speaking of the metaverse, there is Facebook potentially trying to charge a monthly fee, same as Twitter, for, I guess, Facebook extra features, or to keep the verified status or something. Although, in all fairness, I don't know how many people need a verified status on Facebook. Basically, everybody on Facebook in particular needs a verified status because there's too many fake accounts on Facebook in general. I do like the idea of an art gallery in VR, but so far, including this game, I've yet to see an art gallery that looks actually good or that has enough variety in it in the first place to justify its own existence, as far as having famous art or art and all. Space Stacks looks interesting. Yeah, assuming YouTube Shorts did get more and more popular and I got more and more comments on the games that are getting shown off, I could very easily see myself being influenced. I'll give this a chance. Well, actually, online co-op horror game. It says it has single player. I question if it really does. But yeah, I could start to get a better feel of what the average gamer who at least sees my YouTube Shorts feels as far as games. I could see it even pushing me somewhat further away from my default ideas, certainly. Left to my own devices, this is just like the same screenshot every time. I would choose to play a lot more anime, lewd, or porn games if I could on YouTube, and certainly that probably wouldn't give me the best feel as far as what the average gamer is looking for. But yeah, total race doesn't look like anything. Of course, left to the average gamer's influence, if I was just to completely concede all personal opinion, I would then end up playing a lot of Halo and a lot of Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, Modern Warzone, Modern Warfare and Warzone. And those kinds of games are not going to interest me or keep me happy with playing video games. So at some point I would just want to stop playing video games. Yeah, I've been doing this channel for I think over 10 years now. And the one thing that hasn't changed is the desire to play video games. Perhaps in some pretty big ways I've lost the ability to enjoy a lot of video games, and I'm definitely looking at them more from a critical eye and definitely complaining and whining about aspects of video games more than ever, from that critical perspective. So yeah, I definitely don't have the thought where I could just turn off my brain and remember the good parts and forget the bad parts. If anything, I just forget everything once I play one game and move on to the other, to the next, unless it's a particularly great game. Traveler, the AI story. Is this one more of these games that's going to be claimed to have been written by an artificial intelligence like ChatGPT? Let's see. Series of diverse fantastical worlds, all crafted by advanced artificial intelligence, it says. I question if this is true. Let's look at the backgrounds and see if that's possibly true, because inherently, without putting a lot of work into it, you're going to get very inconsistent backgrounds. And I mean, I guess it could be true. I question, though, if it really is. Regardless, I don't think society should probably say yes to AI generated video games or AI artwork. I don't think we're ready for that. I think particularly if we're going to get to a point where computers are just creating all art, then we need universal basic income to feed all those starving artists that are losing out on even more work. But also, I think it is really just a realm of scams at this point, in which they're having artists uncredited and not making the art through artificial intelligence, or they are making it through artificial intelligence, but the artificial intelligence is really just stealing and committing copyright violations of other artists instead of being truly inspired by an artist. So yeah, I think a blanket ban on AI art is the way to go. This feels much like NFTs at this point. That is one of the things that the new guy who has been put in charge of YouTube also was a big proponent of, was NFTs. So that would kind of suck if we start to see NFTs show up in YouTube. But I also wouldn't be surprised if the guy said something nice about NFTs back when NFTs looked like they could make every company money, before there was a massive pushback and the realization that there wasn't really money to be made there. This Vanessa game is interesting because it's like they asset flipped a 3D model of a lady in a skin suit, and then asset flipped a village, and then tried to make Spider-Man, which I just don't get it. It seems like that's more work than your average asset flip to really just show off a skin tight lady, spider lady, who doesn't look like anything. It doesn't particularly look good. It's like this definitely comes off like somebody at some point was actually trying to make a Spider-Man game. They failed. They sold their programming code to somebody else who then finished the job by asset flipping all the textures in the 3D model. That's the only way I can imagine a game like this would get made. Atomic Heart is out. Despite reviewers not liking it, we can see of the 308 reviewers right now, 83% of people do like it, which is very possible that the suggestion here is to just not play it on a higher difficulty. When you get to the outside world too, there are these towers that will shut off the security in that area and stop the enemies from infinitely respawning. And I'm not sure the game shows you where those towers are, or influence or makes it easy to get to those towers on the first turn. There is also an upgrade station, which is what this interface is, that seems like it is always verbally sexually harassing the main character. And again, it's probably a little too much from the reviews I've seen. I kind of think it's kind of funny. It basically feels like it is a callback to Red Dwarf, because at one point the main character on Red Dwarf is basically like sexually harassing a vending machine, or hitting on a vending machine, and the vending machine is hitting on him. And they took that joke, I think, and pushed it further. There's no point here to even put this on the fall list, though. This needs to go on the wish list. And yes, if somebody wanted to friend me on Steam and gift me Atomic Heart, that would be great. I could finish Prey relatively quickly and then start playing Atomic Heart. Arguably, I think there might be a good point to wait until at least the first patch, because I think you could fix some of the complaints or make a mode or have options, just like a verbosity meter to lower the number of comments being made could happen, or just removing some lines of dialogue could happen. Honestly, you could potentially make a patch where you just removed some of the sound files. This game also installs the shader cache when you first install, so this would be like the first game I would have ever played that admits that they're pre-rendering shaders and gives me a chance to see how well my computer in particular handles shaders and pre-rendering shaders. But yeah, so far since I've been playing old games, I have not run into micro stuttering that I would blame on shader rendering caches or anything like that. Whereas DF Retro is just constantly talking about stuttering because of shaders. But yeah, I'll put this on the wish list. I'll make a YouTube short around it. It'll come out way too late. Perhaps somebody will complain that I'm promoting a game that's several months old by the time the video comes out. Like, inherently that is still part of the problem of the way I'm doing these YouTube shorts, is that I'm making so many I could either just flood people's feeds, and I basically am already with 3 or 4 a day, or games are just going to be delayed. So this next adult game is called Furry Sweeper, which is weird because now we are basically at a point where we've seen 2, maybe even 3 furry games and 1 2D anime visual novel, and that's it. This Furry Sweeper seems to be a wild collection of inconsistent animated furry images. Not anime. They're all over the place in style and size and depiction. It seems to be all female furry characters, and then you're just playing Minesweeper. The game is selling for $2.69 and is English only, and that is all way too much. Way too expensive for what it's offering. Next, we have a game on Steam called Research Story, which looks like it's a Stardew Valley clone. I'll give it a short. I'll even give it a follow, even though it probably doesn't deserve it. I probably wouldn't want to play it. And then we finally finished here. So then we're at the GameDeveloper.com articles. Frogwares has delayed Sherlock Holmes games after the Russian attacks on Ukraine. There is a report that Tencent is no longer interested in creating VR hardware. I thought this had been confirmed, but apparently this is just a report still. And then Mia Claw Studio and Little Red Dog have been acquired by Supernova Capital. I don't recognize any of these companies. The double swap means both studios are now fully owned by the private equity firm, which I'm not sure there's ever been a time where being owned by a private equity firm was a smart idea. I guess they made this game Out There Omega. Tencent leads a $10 million investment into fitness game maker Quell, which don't know Quell either. Well, inside baseball stuff. Okay, and then we have some fall list cleanup here. A sim called City of Gangsters. It is positive enough. It's not in early access. We can put that on the wish list. City Limits would either need more time or I should just get rid of it now. I'll give this more time to see if it becomes relevant. Citizen Sleeper. What kind of game is this? Almost feels like it's a text-based RPG. TT RPGs. Tabletop RPG. I'll put it on the wish list, but I'd have to figure out a better understanding of what this game actually is. Because it does seem like it's just got a lot of visuals when it's mostly just text. Which, honestly, even at that, while I mostly don't want to play, almost 100% don't want to play a text-based game, if you can get the visuals into it, if you can make it look like it's a pretty experience, I'd kind of love to highlight one text-based game just to contrast what is normally a massive field of black background with, or white background with black text-based games with no animations at all, or very minimal animations at best. Circus Pocus. I think we probably have to get rid of this at this point. Yeah, it's just not relevant enough, but I'll give it some more time to think about. Logic Circuit, Marble Puzzles. I might make an exception and say yes to this anyways. But I'll give it more time since it's relatively new. Circuit Superstars. It's a racing game. It's not in VR, is it? I don't know if I really would ever want to play a racing game like this, but if I am going to play one, I do want one on the wish list that's actually very well received. It's also published by Square Enix, so if maybe that might argue it's slightly better quality, but you are talking about Square Enix, so it really doesn't make that argument. Circuit City. This might be a game I'm making an exception for too. Let's see. I don't know if this is really a city builder using electrical circuits or if this is more of a kind of tower defense game. And I don't know if this is really trying to represent what the actual circuitry would be as much as this is just using 3D models of electrical components. See if we could see some reviews. Says it's buggy. Alright, well, I'll give this more time. Think about it. Ideally, there would be a better version of this. Of that type of game. We have a card game, which I'll say yes to. But arguably, too many card games already. Like, I'm already struggling to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Alone, and then I'm playing Marvel Snap still for no good reason, and then still playing the Goblin game on my cell phone. The Scions of Vega, I think I'll say yes to, although I'm not sure this isn't for the most part just a walking simulator, but it is mostly positive. Chubby Bear Smash. Seems like it's a game that uses a webcam motion control, so that would be a no for me anyways, and it's just not relevant. And then Chrono Breach Ultra. I think we say no to Chrono Breach Ultra too. It's a platformer shooter. It doesn't look terrible, but it's just not quite relevant enough. Like, either I make a special exception and say yes to this, and Like, yeah, I add this and say yes to it, or just say no, and I think just saying no is the better point, because it doesn't look like there's anything particularly special here. And Research Story was the game that just came out. Okay. So, with that, let me bring back this. I don't think we have any new missions here that would have shown up. See if we get a connection and update and see if we maybe got a Duel live. Nope. So, we did make some progress with the Duel Pass. Can receive that. And then I will very quickly scroll down my Twitter feed just to see if there's any new news worth mentioning. Otherwise, that's going to be it for today's stream. Come on, how do you get back to the top? You click on the following here. Any new video game news? Weird. Weird weekend in that we did not see a single 3D CGI adult game. Usually those get churned out pretty quickly as far as adult games. We got one otome adult game, but generally you tend to see a slide puzzle like garbage anime hentai type game or troll hentai games. All we got was, and we got like two or three furry games that, I mean, at least one of those was a low effort garbage game. The other two may have been actual efforts to make something that would satisfy the furry community. Although every time I see a furry game, I really question whether or not that's a troll game, or whether there is an actual audience that likes that type of game. Just scrolling down here. Pokemon trading card game events happening. Maybe I shouldn't bother to follow Pokemon trading card events. Here's a Ozzy Osbourne playing Horizon Call of the Mountain on the PlayStation VR 2. If anything, it seems to really just highlight like how old and kind of fat he is, which is a mean thing to say, certainly, but yeah, he's old, and so I imagine he has no idea where he is or what he's doing there, and I imagine he doesn't really play video games at all, so I imagine he has no idea what he's even looking at to compare it to. You wouldn't be as famous as Ozzy Osbourne as a musician if you spent a lot of times playing video games. You can do a lot of video game playing, certainly in between the transitions from one arena to the other during a concert, but you tend not to be that big of a gamer. Ozzy Osbourne, more notorious for doing drugs and alcohol in his past, and you do also need to like practice singing and writing music and spending a lot of your focus on that. Even as a promotion gimmick, it's a weird promotion gimmick. Because, yeah, unless one of his songs is in Call of the Mountain, which maybe that's the case, is that he has licensed those songs. It's kind of a sad ending for any musician, is that either you die young and then your music goes to some surviving family member, or more likely a music industry production company, or you still don't really have anything you can do with your music, even if you live long enough to potentially retire. Um, hmm. Yeah, and I guess there's no other news. So that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. There's also a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and give me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.